I'm Lydia, and I'm 31. During Christmas dinner, I'm thanking my aunt for the wonderful keychain she sent me for my birthday 2 months ago. My aunt stops stirring the gravy, stares at the table in silence, and says calmly, "I bought you a $400,000 apartment. The keychain came as a bonus." The smiles disappear from everyone's faces. One by one, my family members turn white as paper. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family outsider. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. Picture this: a perfectly set Christmas table, my stepmother's best china, candles flickering, and the scent of her famous honey-glazed ham filling the dining room. Everyone's laughing, passing dishes, playing the perfect family. My dad's carving the turkey with his usual precision. My 19-year-old half-sister Emma is scrolling through her phone even though phones are supposedly banned at dinner. And my stepmother Linda is directing traffic like the general she is. And there's me, sitting in the same spot I've occupied for 15 years since Dad remarried, right next to little Aunt Margaret, who flew in from Phoenix as a surprise. I'm genuinely happy to see her. She's the only person in this family who's ever treated me like I actually belong here. "Aunt Margaret," I say, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Thank you so much for the keychain you sent for my birthday. It's beautiful. I carry it everywhere." I pull it from my purse, a simple silver chain with a small heart charm. Nothing fancy, but coming from her, it meant everything. The room goes quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people enjoying good food, but the kind of silence that makes your stomach drop. Aunt Margaret's fork hovers halfway to her mouth, her eyes narrowing as she looks around the table. Dad stops carving mid-slice. Linda's smile freezes like it's been painted on. "Keychain?" Aunt Margaret's voice is dangerously calm. She sets down her fork with deliberate precision. "Lydia, sweetheart, what keychain?" That's when I realize something is very, very wrong. The way Emma suddenly sits up straight, the way Linda's hand trembles as she reaches for her wine glass, the way Dad clears his throat like he's about to deliver bad news. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. To understand why this moment feels like a bomb going off, you need to know what my family is really like. And trust me, it's not the Norman Rockwell painting they pretend to be. Growing up as the stepdaughter in this house was like being a permanent guest who'd overstayed their welcome. My mom died when I was 7, and Dad remarried Linda 2 years later. Linda brought her own special brand of subtle cruelty, disguised as concern for my well-being. While Emma got designer clothes for school shopping, I got carefully selected items from the clearance rack. "We want to teach Lydia the value of money," Linda would explain to relatives, as if frugality was a character-building exercise meant only for me. When Emma wanted a car for her 16th birthday, she got a brand new Honda Civic with a bow on top. When I turned 16, Linda suggested I could borrow her old minivan when it wasn't needed for family errands, which turned out to be approximately never. The pattern was always the same. Emma's needs came first, Emma's wants were necessities, and my requests were luxuries we couldn't afford. When I wanted to take art classes, Dad said we needed to prioritize practical skills. When Emma wanted piano lessons, they hired a private instructor who came to the house twice a week. College was where the inequality became impossible to ignore. I spent my senior year of high school working at a movie theater to save money, wrote dozens of scholarship essays, and chose my state school specifically because I could afford the in-state tuition. Emma, on the other hand, applied to 5 private colleges with application fees that cost more than I made in a week at the theater. But here's the thing that really got to me. They acted like this was normal. Like treating their daughters completely differently was just natural family order. When relatives commented on the disparity, Linda would smile sweetly and say, "Each girl has different needs. Lydia is so independent and responsible. Emma needs more guidance." Translation: Lydia can figure it out herself. Emma deserves to be taken care of. The only person who ever called them out on this was Aunt Margaret, my dad's sister. She was the one who sent me graduation gifts, who remembered my birthday every year, who asked about my life like it actually mattered. She never had children of her own, but she treated me like I was precious, which, after growing up in this house, felt revolutionary. When I graduated college with my nursing degree, magna cum laude and debt-free thanks to scholarships and working through school, the family celebration consisted of dinner at Applebee's. When Emma graduated high school with a C+ average, they threw a party that cost more than my car. By the time I moved out, I'd learned not to expect much from them. Christmas and birthday gifts were practical items I needed anyway. Holiday celebrations were events I attended but didn't really belong to. Family vacations were things they planned around my schedule, not something they invited me to join, which is why Aunt Margaret was so important to me. She was the only person who made me feel like family. By 25, I'd built a life that looked nothing like theirs. I was a single mom working as a pediatric nurse, living in a small apartment with my 4-year-old son, Danny. His father had disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy, leaving me to figure everything out alone, which, honestly, was pretty much what I expected by then. The apartment was tiny but clean, with hand-me-down furniture and toys from garage sales. Danny didn't care that his high chair came from Goodwill or that his bedroom was really just a corner of the living room with a colorful curtain divider. He was happy, healthy, and loved. That's all that mattered to me. My family's relationship with Danny was complicated. They claimed to love him, of course. Linda would post pictures of him on Facebook with captions about being the world's best grandma. But when it came to actual help, like babysitting so I could pick up extra shifts, they were mysteriously always busy. Emma, now in college at a school that cost more per year than I made, would occasionally drop by to play with Danny for an hour before complaining about how exhausting children were. Dad would visit monthly, bringing small toys and staying just long enough to feel like he'd done his grandparent duty. The one person who showed up consistently was Aunt Margaret. Every few weeks, she'd drive 2 hours from her house to spend the weekend with us. She'd arrive with homemade cookies, new books for Danny, and genuine interest in our lives. She'd babysit without being asked, help with household projects, and treat both Danny and me like we mattered. When Danny got sick with pneumonia at 3 years old, requiring a week-long hospital stay, she took time off work to help. She slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair, brought me changes of clothes, and held Danny when I needed to shower or eat. My own father visited twice during that week, both times for less than an hour. That's when I realized who my real family was. It wasn't the people who shared my last name or lived in the house I grew up in. It was the person who showed up when things got hard. Last year, when Aunt Margaret called to tell me she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, I didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" I asked immediately. "When are your appointments? Who's driving you to treatments?" The answer, predictably, was nobody. Dad was too busy with work. Linda had a prior commitment with Emma's college activities. Emma was, of course, too young to handle such serious matters. So I became Margaret's transportation, her advocate, her support system. Twice a week for 6 months, I loaded Danny into his car seat after my shift and drove 2 hours to Margaret's house. Then another hour to the cancer center, 3 hours for treatment, another hour back to her house, and 2 hours home. Danny learned to entertain himself quietly in hospital waiting rooms, coloring in books that Margaret bought him. During the worst of the chemotherapy, I'd stay overnight, making sure she ate, took her medications, and didn't fall. Danny would curl up next to her on the couch, his small hand patting her bald head gently. "Aunt Maggie is brave," he'd whisper to me. "Yes, she is." I'd agree. And she deserved better from her family than what she was getting. The night Margaret finished her last round of chemo was one of the best nights of my life. We sat in her living room, Danny asleep between us, and she grabbed my hand with more strength than she'd had in months. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Not just medically, though your nursing skills certainly helped. You showed up when everyone else had excuses. You made me feel loved when I felt forgotten." I squeezed her hand back. "Your family, real family. This is what people do for each other." Her eyes filled with tears. "Your father called me twice during the entire 6 months. Twice." Linda sent a card. Emma texted occasionally. She shook her head in disgust. "But you, working full-time, raising a child alone, you found a way to be here every single time I needed you." The anger in her voice was new. Margaret had always been diplomatic about family conflicts, the peacekeeper who smoothed over uncomfortable moments. But cancer, it seemed, had burned away her patience for pretense. "After Richard died," she continued, referring to her husband who'd passed 3 years earlier, "I thought about changing my will. He left me well provided for, and we never had children. I'd always planned to leave everything to your father, assuming he'd take care of Emma and help you as needed. But this experience has shown me who actually deserves my consideration." I felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Margaret, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do." Her voice was firm. "You need to understand something, Lydia. I've been watching your family dynamic for years, making excuses, hoping things would improve. They haven't. If anything, they've gotten worse." She was right. Even during her cancer treatment, when you'd think family would rally together, the patterns remained the same. Dad would call me for updates on Margaret's condition rather than calling her directly. Linda would ask me to relay messages instead of picking up the phone herself. They treated me like a communication service between them and Margaret, rather than recognizing that I was the one actually caring for her. When Margaret's hair started growing back and her energy returned, she began making plans. "I'm going to travel," she announced one afternoon. "All those places Richard and I talked about visiting but never got to. I'm starting with Europe in the spring, 3 months of seeing everything I've always wanted to see. I was thrilled for her. After everything she'd been through, she deserved every moment of joy and adventure she could find, but I was also going to miss her terribly. Margaret was my anchor in the family, the person who reminded me that I was worthy of love and consideration. Before I go, she said, I want to do something special for your birthday. 28 is a big year, starting your late 20s. I have plans. My birthday was in October, and Margaret left for her European adventure right after my birthday in late October. She'd beaten cancer, and she was finally living the life she'd dreamed of. Her postcards arrived weekly, filled with stories of art galleries in Paris, beaches in Greece, and pasta in Italy. She sounded happier than I'd ever heard her. 3 days before my birthday, a delivery truck pulled up to my apartment building. I wasn't expecting anything, so I was confused when the driver handed me a clipboard to sign. But there it was, my name and address, a package from Margaret with a European postmark. Inside was a small jewelry box containing a simple silver keychain with a heart charm and a note. Happy birthday, sweetheart. This is just a little something to hold you over until I get back and give you your real present. All my love, Aunt Margaret. It wasn't much, but knowing she'd thought of me while exploring ancient ruins and famous museums made it perfect. I attached it to my keys immediately and carried it everywhere, just as I'd told the family at Christmas dinner. What I didn't know then was that this small keychain was meant to be an afterthought, a placeholder for something much, much bigger. October 28th, my birthday, came and went quietly. I worked a double shift at the hospital because holiday pay helped with Christmas expenses for Danny. When I got home, exhausted but grateful for the extra money, there was a voicemail from Dad wishing me a happy birthday and apologizing for forgetting to call earlier. Linda had apparently reminded him. Emma sent a text message with cake emojis. No card, no gift, no invitation to dinner. Just acknowledgments that yes, this was indeed the day I was born 28 years ago. It wasn't surprising, but it still stung a little. Danny, at 4, had made me a construction paper card at daycare with handprints, and the words, I love mommy, spelled out in glittery letters. His gift was worth more than anything they could have bought me anyway. I called Margaret that evening, using the international number she'd given me for emergencies. I got the keychain, I told her, fingering the silver heart. It's beautiful. Thank you for thinking of me on your trip. Oh, sweetheart? Her voice was filled with laughter and something else I couldn't identify. That little thing is nothing. Wait until you see what I really got you. It's going to change your life. I assumed she meant a nice piece of jewelry or maybe something special from one of the countries she was visiting. Margaret was generous, but her gifts were usually thoughtful rather than extravagant. A scarf from Ireland or a cookbook from Italy would have been more than enough to make me happy. November passed quickly. Margaret's postcards kept arriving, showing her adventures in different countries. She sounded energetic and joyful, making up for all the time she'd lost during treatment. In one card, she mentioned that she'd asked Dad to handle something important for her while she was away. Something about my birthday present. I thought that was odd. Margaret usually handled her own affairs, and she'd never involved my father in gift-giving before. But I assumed it was something simple. Maybe having flowers delivered or coordinating the shipping of something too large to send internationally. December arrived with the usual pre-holiday chaos. My work schedule intensified as other nurses took vacation time, and I was saving every penny for Danny's Christmas gifts. We'd started our Advent calendar tradition, reading Christmas stories each night and drinking hot chocolate while looking at lights in our neighborhood. During this time, I noticed Emma posting pictures on social media from what looked like a new apartment. The photos showed a beautiful living space with modern furniture, huge windows, and expensive-looking decorations. When I mentioned it to Dad during one of our brief phone calls, he said Emma had gotten a great opportunity to house sit for someone traveling internationally. Lucky girl, I said, not thinking much about it. Emma always seemed to land in comfortable situations. When she'd needed an internship for college, Linda's friend magically had an opening at her marketing firm. When she needed a summer job, Dad's business partner suddenly needed an assistant. Emma moved through life with invisible hands smoothing her path. Meanwhile, Danny and I were planning our own humble Christmas. We'd made paper snowflakes for decorations and planned to buy a small tree from the lot down the street. I'd saved enough to buy him the Lego set he'd been wanting and a few smaller gifts. It would be a simple Christmas, but it would be filled with love. The invitation to Christmas dinner at Dad and Linda's house came in mid-December, the same generic phone call I got every year. We're having dinner at 3, Linda informed me. Margaret is flying back as a surprise. She wanted to spend Christmas with family. My heart jumped. I hadn't seen Margaret since before her trip, and I'd missed her terribly. The thought of having her at Christmas dinner made the whole event worthwhile. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe with Margaret there, I'd actually feel like part of the family instead of a courtesy invitation. I spent extra money I couldn't really afford on a nice dress for dinner and a small gift for everyone. Danny was excited to see his great aunt again, and to play with whatever new books she'd inevitably brought him from her travels. I had no idea that Margaret's surprise return was about to expose a betrayal that would shatter my understanding of my family forever. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright. Danny woke up at 6, as children do on Christmas, bouncing on my bed with excitement about Santa's visit. We opened our modest pile of presents by the small tree, and his joy over the Lego set made every extra shift I'd worked worth it. Getting ready for dinner at Dad and Linda's house, I felt oddly hopeful. Margaret's postcards over the past 3 months had been filled with stories of self-discovery and adventure. Maybe her new perspective would bring some positive energy to our family dynamic. Maybe this Christmas would be the turning point I'd been hoping for my entire adult life. Danny looked adorable in his little button-down shirt and tiny khakis, clutching the book about dinosaurs that Santa had brought him. "Will Aunt Maggie have presents from far away?" he asked as we drove to the house where I'd grown up. "I'm sure she'll have wonderful stories," I told him, "and maybe something special, but remember, spending time with her is the real gift." The house was decorated exactly as it had been every year since Linda moved in. White lights, silver and gold ornaments, everything coordinated and perfect. Christmas music played softly in the background, and the dining room table was set with Linda's finest china. Emma was already there, wearing a new designer dress and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Lydia!" Dad hugged me warmly, and for a moment, I let myself believe this was genuine family affection. "Danny, my boy, look how you've grown!" Linda air-kissed me near both cheeks, careful not to disturb her makeup. "You look lovely," she said in the tone she used when she was being politely civil. "Emma's been telling us about her new living arrangement. Such a wonderful opportunity." Emma beamed, launching into a detailed description of the apartment she was house-sitting. "It's in the best part of downtown," she gushed. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and floor-to-ceiling windows with an amazing view. The owner left it fully furnished with the most beautiful things. I feel like I'm living in a magazine. I made appropriate, impressed noises while setting Danny up with his coloring books in the living room. Emma had always been lucky with opportunities, and house-sitting a luxury apartment was exactly the kind of thing that fell into her lap regularly. "Speaking of apartments," Dad said, glancing at Linda, "how's your housing situation going? Still renting that place near the hospital?" "It's working out fine," I replied carefully. I'd learned not to mention financial struggles around them. Any admission of difficulty would be met with suggestions for budgeting or lifestyle changes, as if my problems were simply matters of poor planning rather than the reality of single motherhood on a nurse's salary. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:30, and Linda rushed to answer it. "Surprise!" came a familiar voice, and there was Margaret, tanned and radiant, carrying a suitcase and wearing the brightest smile I'd seen on her face in years. "Aunt Maggie!" Danny launched himself at her legs, and she scooped him up with enthusiasm that showed how much she'd missed us too. "My darling boy, you've gotten so tall." She hugged me next, holding me tight. "And my sweet Lydia, I've missed you both so much." She looked incredible. The weight she'd lost during chemo had been replaced with muscle from all the walking she'd done in European cities. Her hair had grown back thicker than before, and her skin glowed with the confidence of someone who'd spent months doing exactly what she wanted. "How was your trip?" I asked, genuine joy filling my voice. "Your postcards made it sound like the adventure of a lifetime." "It was everything I dreamed it would be and more," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But I was ready to come home to the people I love most." Over the next hour, Margaret entertained us with stories of her travels. She'd hiked portions of the Camino de Santiago, taken cooking classes in Tuscany, and spent weeks in museums she'd only dreamed of visiting. The whole family seemed more relaxed with her there, as if her presence reminded them how to actually enjoy each other's company. As we sat down to dinner, Margaret caught my eye across the table and winked. "I have something very special to tell everyone," she said. "But first, let's enjoy Linda's beautiful meal." The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. Even Emma seemed less focused on herself, genuinely interested in Margaret's adventures. I found myself relaxing, remembering what family dinners could feel like when they weren't full of underlying tension. That's when I made the comment that changed everything. Reaching across the table to squeeze Margaret's hand, I said with genuine warmth, "Aunt Margaret, thank you so much for the keychain you sent for my birthday. It's beautiful. I carry it everywhere." The silence that followed was not the comfortable quiet of a family enjoying time together. It was the silence that comes before an explosion, heavy with secrets about to be exposed. And Margaret's expression as she slowly set down her fork told me that this Christmas dinner was about to become unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. Margaret's fork hovers over her plate, her eyes moving slowly from my face to Dad's, then to Linda's, then to Emma's. You know that moment in movies when the music stops and you hear every small sound amplified? The ticking of the grandfather clock, someone's nervous breathing, the soft clink of ice settling in water glasses. Keychain. Margaret repeats slowly, like she's testing the word. Lydia? Sweetheart, what keychain are you talking about? I pull it from my purse, holding up the simple silver chain with the small heart charm. This one. You sent it for my birthday with that sweet note about it being something to hold me over until you got back. Margaret stares at the keychain like it's a snake that might bite her. Then she looks around the table again, and I watch her face change. The warm, travel glow expression hardens into something I've never seen before. Pure, cold fury. I didn't send you a keychain, she says quietly. I bought you a $400,000 apartment. The words hit the table like a physical blow. Emma's phone clatters onto her plate. Linda's wine glass slips from her fingers, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Dad's face goes through several colors before settling on gray. And me? I just sit there, blinking stupidly. Because surely I misheard. Surely my 70-year-old aunt didn't just say she bought me an apartment worth more than I'll make in 10 years. Surely this is some kind of European humor I don't understand. I'm sorry, what? I managed to say. Margaret's voice is deadly calm. Before I left for Europe, I called your father. I told him I wanted to do something special for your birthday. Something big. You'd spent 6 months taking care of me during the worst period of my life, driving 4 hours round trip twice a week, staying overnight when I was too weak to be alone, bringing Danny to chemo appointments because you couldn't afford a babysitter. She's looking directly at Dad now, and he's shrinking in his chair like a scolded child. I told him I'd found a beautiful apartment downtown. 2 bedrooms. Perfect for you and Danny. Safe neighborhood, good schools, close to the hospital where you work. I put down the full purchase price and had the deed transferred to your name. My brain is struggling to process this information. An apartment. A real apartment. With my name on the deed. But Emma said she was house-sitting. House-sitting. Margaret's laugh is bitter. Emma, sweetheart, whose apartment have you been living in for the past 2 months? Emma's face crumbles. She looks at Linda with pure panic, like a child who's been caught lying about breaking something valuable. Mom, you promised me. What exactly did she promise you? Margaret asks, and her voice could freeze fire. The floodgates open. Emma starts crying, but not the delicate tears of a wronged princess. These are ugly, panicked sobs of someone whose world is collapsing. Mom said you'd never find out. She said Aunt Margaret would be traveling for months, and by the time she got back, I'd be settled and you'd just have to accept it. I have to hand it to them. The logic is almost impressive in its audacity. Take a gift meant for me, give it to the golden child, and frame it as fairness because I already had somewhere to live. You know, my tiny 2-bedroom rental where Danny and I share the living room because his bedroom is actually a converted closet. Dad finally finds his voice, though it comes out as more of a croak. Margaret, I can explain. Linda convinced me it would just be temporary until we could buy Emma her own place. I thought we'd have time to explain everything to you when you returned. Oh, please do, she says, leaning back in her chair. Explain to me how you took an apartment I bought for Lydia and decided Emma should live in it instead. Explain to me how you forged thank you cards in Lydia's name. Yes. Richard, I received 3 lovely letters from Lydia thanking me for the wonderful apartment and telling me how settled and happy she was there. My mouth falls open. They wrote thank you letters. Actually sat down and pretended to be me, expressing gratitude for a gift they stole. The sheer planning involved is breathtaking. We were going to tell her eventually. Linda jumps in, and I almost laugh at how predictable she is. When caught red-handed, Linda always has a timeline that makes everything acceptable. We thought Emma needed the space for college just for a few years. Lydia is so independent, she's been managing fine on her own. We were going to give her the apartment after Emma graduated. In 4 years, I say flatly. You were going to give me my own birthday present in 4 years. It's not like that, Dad says desperately. We just thought, practical considerations, Emma's education, and there it is, the same old song. Emma's needs come first. Emma's future matters more. Emma deserves the better option because she's Emma, the golden child who's never had to work for anything, never had to sacrifice, never had to choose between buying groceries and paying rent. I look around the table at these people I've called family for 24 years. Dad, squirming in a seat, avoiding my eyes. Linda, frantically calculating how to spin this into something acceptable. Emma, still sobbing like she's the victim in this scenario. And you know what? For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely calm. Not hurt, not angry, just clear. Like someone just handed me glasses after years of trying to see through a dirty window. Margaret stands up slowly, her hands shaking with barely controlled fury. When she speaks, her voice trembles with emotion. So all three of you knew this apartment belonged to Lydia and decided to steal it anyway. Is that what I'm understanding here? Dad looks genuinely stunned. Margaret, we never meant... I want the keys to that apartment. Right now. Margaret, please, let's discuss this rationally. Dad starts. Rationally. She laughs. And it's not a pleasant sound. You want to discuss rationality? Let's talk about how rational it was to steal from your own daughter. Let's talk about how rational it was to lie to me for 2 months. Let's talk about how rational it is for Emma to be living in an apartment that doesn't belong to her. Emma's face crumples with genuine panic. We were supposed to have more time. You weren't supposed to thank her at dinner. Emma, Margaret's voice is ice cold. Your mother lied to you. That apartment was never meant for you. It was purchased specifically for Lydia, with her name on the deed, as a thank you for taking care of me when the rest of this family couldn't be bothered. The truth of that hits the table like a physical slap. While I was driving Margaret to chemo appointments, staying overnight when she was too weak to be alone, bringing Danny to waiting rooms because I couldn't afford babysitters, where was everyone else? Dad was too busy with work. Linda was overwhelmed with Emma's college preparations. Emma was too young for such serious matters. But taking credit for my gift? That they had time for. The keys, Margaret repeats. Now. Linda tries one more deflection. We spent money decorating it. Emma needed furniture, bedding, kitchen supplies. We've invested thousands. Money you spent on stolen property. Margaret cuts her off. Would you like me to call the police and explain the situation? Because I have documentation of the purchase, the deed transfer, and copies of every forged letter you sent in Lydia's name. The threat of police involvement changes everything. Dad's face goes pale and even Emma stops sniffling. Linda fumbles in her purse and produces a set of keys, placing them on the table like she's surrendering a weapon. Margaret scoops them up and turns to me. Lydia, would you like to see your apartment? Would I like to see my apartment? The apartment I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago? The apartment that's been mine for 2 months while I've been paying rent on a place where my 4-year-old son sleeps in a converted closet. Yes, I say quietly. Yes, I think I would. As I stand up to follow Margaret, Emma grabs my arm. Lydia, please. You have to understand. I didn't know it was meant for you specifically. I thought it was just family property, and Mom decided I should use it for college. I look down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. For a moment, I see the little girl who used to follow me around when she was small. Before Linda taught her that we weren't really sisters, just two people who happened to live in the same house. Emma, I say gently, did you really not know the apartment was specifically meant for me? Look, we all knew you'd never fight back. You never do. Mom said you'd just accept it eventually, like you always do with everything else. The honesty is breathtaking. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd calculated that I would be too passive to defend myself. I carefully remove her hand from my arm. But this time, you were wrong. Margaret is waiting by the door, her car keys already in hand. Are you ready, sweetheart? Danny has been remarkably quiet throughout this entire exchange, coloring in his dinosaur book, and occasionally looking up at the adults with the resigned expression of a child who's learned that grown-up conversations often don't make sense. I gather him up along with his books. We're going to see a new place, I tell him as I buckle him into his car seat. Aunt Maggie has a surprise for us. As we pull out of the driveway, I see Linda and Emma standing in the doorway watching us leave. Dad is nowhere to be seen. He's probably in his study, doing what he always does when family situations get uncomfortable, hiding until someone else fixes it. The drive to downtown takes 20 minutes, during which Margaret fills in the details I've been missing. The apartment is in a converted historic building, with original hardwood floors and huge windows. It's walking distance from Danny's daycare and a short commute to the hospital. The neighborhood has tree-lined streets, a small park, and the kind of coffee shop where locals actually know your name. I looked at dozens of places, Margaret says as we drive through increasingly nice neighborhoods. But when I saw this one, I knew it was perfect for you. It felt like home. We pull up in front of a beautiful brick building with black shutters and flower boxes in the windows. It's the kind of place I'd walked past before and imagined living in, but never seriously considered because it was so far out of my price range. 3rd floor, Margaret says, leading us to the entrance. Corner unit with views of the park. The elevator is small and charming, with brass buttons and wood paneling. Danny presses the button for the 3rd floor and bounces with excitement. When the doors open, Margaret leads us to a door marked 3C and unlocks it with the keys she took from Linda. The door swings open, and I step into the most beautiful living space I've ever seen. The apartment is stunning, not because it's fancy or expensive, but because it's perfect. Warm hardwood floors stretch through an open living area with windows that flood the space with natural light. The kitchen has white cabinets and granite countertops that gleam like they've never been used. Through the living room windows, I can see the park Margaret mentioned, with mature trees and a playground where children are playing even in the December cold. 2 bedrooms, Margaret says, leading us down a hallway. This one would be Danny's. Danny's potential bedroom is twice the size of our current living room. It has built-in bookshelves, a large closet, and windows facing east so he'd wake up to morning sunshine. He immediately runs to the window and presses his face against the glass. "Mommy, look! Swings!" The master bedroom takes my breath away. It's spacious without being overwhelming, with enough room for a real dresser. Maybe even a reading chair. The closet is bigger than Danny's current sleeping space. But what gets me is the bathroom. A full bathroom with a deep tub, perfect for long soaks after difficult shifts at the hospital. The previous tenant left some furniture, Margaret explains as we walk back to the living area. Basic pieces that I thought you might want to keep. That's when I notice that the apartment isn't empty. There's a sectional sofa in soft gray fabric, a coffee table that looks like real wood, and a dining set that could actually seat 6 people. The kitchen is stocked with dishes, cookware, and even small appliances. But these aren't the basic pieces Margaret mentioned. These are expensive items, carefully chosen to complement the space. The kind of furniture I browse in stores but never buy because it costs more than I make in a month. "Margaret," I say slowly, "this furniture is brand new." She smiles sheepishly. "I may have gone a little overboard with the move-in preparations. I wanted you to be able to walk in and feel at home immediately." I sink onto the sofa, and it's exactly as comfortable as it looks. Danny climbs up beside me, already claiming his spot. "Is this our new house, Mommy?" I think it might be, I tell him, though I'm still struggling to believe this is real. My phone rings, jarring me back to reality. Dad's name appears on the screen, and Margaret nods at me to answer it. "Lydia, where are you?" His voice is tight with stress. "We need to talk about this situation." "What situation is that, Dad?" "You know what I mean. The apartment thing. We can work this out. Maybe Emma can stay there just until the end of the semester. Then we'll transition." I look around the beautiful living room, at Danny already arranging his dinosaur figures on the coffee table, at Margaret watching me with encouraging eyes. "No? What do you mean? No? I mean, no, Emma can't stay here until the end of the semester. No, there won't be a transition period. No, we can't work this out. This apartment belongs to me. It's been mine for 2 months while I've been paying rent somewhere else because you decided your daughter deserved my gift more than I did. Lydia, be reasonable. Emma has already moved in, started classes from that location. Her whole routine is built around living there. The audacity is breathtaking. They steal my apartment, let Emma settle in and build her life around it, then ask me to be reasonable about disrupting her routine. Where exactly did you think I was living? Dad? Did you assume I'd just vanish when you gave away my home?" Silence on the other end. "Emma can move out this week," I continue. "She can take her personal belongings, but everything else stays. The furniture, the kitchen supplies, the linens. Everything you bought with the money you should have spent elsewhere stays in my apartment. You can't just kick her out with nowhere to go. Watch me." I hang up and turn off my phone. Margaret is beaming with pride. "I haven't heard you sound that strong in years." She's right. I sound different to myself. Calmer, but firmer. Like I've finally found my backbone after 31 years of searching for it. "What happens now?" "Now you move in. This weekend if you want. I'll help you pack your old place." She pauses. "And Lydia, they're going to keep calling, keep making demands, keep trying to guilt you into backing down. Don't let them." "I won't," I say, and I actually believe myself. Danny has discovered the refrigerator, which is fully stocked with groceries. "Mommy, there's ice cream in here." Of course there is. Margaret planned everything, down to stocking the freezer with a 4-year-old's favorite treats. As Danny chatters about the ice cream flavors he's discovered, my phone starts buzzing with text messages. Linda, Emma, even my father's business partner who's never contacted me directly before. I don't read them. Instead, I walk to the large living room windows and look out at the park where children are playing, at the tree-lined streets where people are walking dogs and carrying coffee cups, at the neighborhood where my son and I are going to build a real life. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I belong. Moving in takes exactly 1 weekend. Turns out, when you don't own much furniture, relocation is surprisingly simple. Our old apartment looked even smaller and more depressing when viewed through the lens of where we were going. The contrast was almost comical, like comparing a closet to a palace. Danny adapted to the change with the resilience that small children possess, treating the move like an adventure rather than an upheaval. He'd run from room to room in the new apartment, claiming spaces and announcing his plans. "This is where my dinosaurs will live," he declared about the built-in shelves in his bedroom. "This is where I'll eat my cereal," he announced about the breakfast bar in the kitchen. Margaret helped with everything, from packing boxes to setting up utilities in my name. She'd thought of details I wouldn't have considered, registering Danny for the school district, finding a pediatrician in the neighborhood, even locating the nearest grocery store and dry cleaner. "You don't have to do all this," I told her as she organized kitchen cabinets with military precision. "Yes, I do," she replied firmly. "Your family stole 2 months of your life in this place. I'm trying to make up for lost time." The calls from Dad, Linda, and Emma continued relentlessly, voice messages that progressed from apologetic to demanding to downright hostile. I'd listened to the first few, but they all followed the same pattern: acknowledgement that mistakes were made, followed by explanations of why Emma's needs should still take priority, ending with accusations that I was being selfish and unreasonable. I stopped listening after the 5th one. On Wednesday evening, a week after we'd moved in, Dad showed up at my door. Not called ahead, not texted to ask if it was convenient, just appeared in my hallway like he had a right to be there. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "No, we don't." I started to close the door, but he put his hand against it. "Lydia, please. 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let him in. Danny was already in his pajamas, watching cartoons on the television that came with the apartment, a flat screen larger than our entire kitchen in the old place. "Nice place," Dad said, looking around with the expression of someone trying to calculate square footage and monthly costs. "Really nice. But here's the thing, sweetheart. Emma is struggling." And there it was. The same old playbook. When logical arguments failed, appeal to my emotional guilt about Emma's well-being. I'd heard this song before, though usually it was about her needing help with homework, or requiring a ride somewhere, or facing some social drama that required the entire family to rearrange their schedules. "Struggling how?" I asked, genuinely curious about what crisis they'd manufactured this time. "She's living in a dorm room the size of a shoebox, sharing a bathroom with 20 other girls. The cafeteria food is making her sick. She can't concentrate on her studies because the conditions are so awful." I blinked at him. "You mean she's living like a normal college student? It's not the same thing." "Why isn't it the same thing, Dad?" He fumbled for an answer that wouldn't sound completely hypocritical. "She's not used to those conditions. She's never had to live that way before." "And whose fault is that?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I wasn't sorry for it. Who made the decision that Emma should never have to experience discomfort or inconvenience? Who created a 20-year-old woman who falls apart when faced with standard college living conditions? "We just want what's best for her." "What about what's best for me?" The words hung in the air between us. "When exactly did you want what was best for me, Dad?" His face flushed red. "That's not fair. We've always cared about your well-being." "Really? When I was 16 and needed a car to get to my job, where was your concern for my well-being? When I was working double shifts to pay for college while Emma got her tuition handed to her, where was your concern then? When I was a single mother struggling to pay rent while taking care of your sister during cancer treatments, where exactly was your concern for what was best for me? Those situations were different." "How?" "You've always been more independent, more capable. Emma needs more support." And there it was. The fundamental truth of my family dynamic, spoken out loud for the first time. Emma needed support because she was delicate and precious. I didn't need support because I was strong and capable. Emma deserved help because she struggled with normal life challenges. I deserved to struggle alone because I could handle it. The twisted logic had shaped my entire life. Every time I'd succeeded despite lack of support, it proved I didn't need help. Every time Emma failed despite massive advantages, it proved she needed more assistance. "Dad," I said quietly, "I need you to leave now." "Lydia, come on. Can't we work something out? Maybe Emma could just use the second bedroom when she needs to study, or stay here on weekends when the dorm is too loud." "Get out. Don't be unreasonable. Get out." The volume of my own voice surprised me. Danny looked up from his cartoons, eyes wide. I rarely raised my voice, and never at family members. Dad stared at me like I'd slapped him. "I don't know what's happened to you, but this isn't the daughter I raised." "You're absolutely right," I said, walking to the door and opening it. "The daughter you raised would have handed over the keys to Emma by now. She would have moved back into a studio apartment and apologized for causing trouble. She would have spent the next 4 years paying rent while Emma lived in the home that was supposed to be hers. He stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to argue further, but something in my expression must have convinced him I was serious. "This isn't over," he said as he stepped into the hallway. "Yes, Dad," I replied calmly. "It is." I closed the door and engaged both locks. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there for several minutes, probably debating whether to knock again. Eventually, he gave up and walked away. Danny looked up from his cartoons. Was Grandpa angry? Grandpa was confused, I told him honestly. Sometimes grown-ups get confused when things don't go the way they expected. Are we in trouble? I sat down beside him on our beautiful sectional sofa, in our light-filled apartment, in the neighborhood where we belonged. No, baby. We're not in trouble. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. The legal transfer of the apartment took place on a Tuesday morning in Margaret's lawyer's office. I'd never owned property before, and the experience of signing documents that made me the official owner of something worth $400,000 felt surreal. Margaret had insisted on making everything legally bulletproof, ensuring that no one could ever again question my right to live there. "Congratulations," the lawyer said, handing me a thick folder containing deeds, insurance documents, and maintenance agreements. "You're officially a property owner." Property owner. At 31, after years of renting cramped apartments and worrying about lease renewals, I owned a home. Not just any home, but a beautiful one in a neighborhood where children played safely in parks and neighbors knew each other's names. The financial relief was immediate and overwhelming. Without rent payments, my nursing salary stretched to cover not just necessities, but small luxuries I'd never been able to afford. Danny's daycare costs became manageable instead of crushing. I could buy groceries without calculating every item. For the first time in years, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. Emma's adjustment to college dormitory life was, according to my sources, not going smoothly. My cousin Sarah, who worked at the university, reported that Emma had been to the housing office multiple times requesting room transfers. She'd complained about noise levels, bathroom cleanliness, and roommate conflicts. The girl who'd lived in luxury her entire life was discovering what most college students considered normal living conditions. According to Sarah, Emma had also approached the financial aid office, asking about additional housing allowances. When told that her family's income level made her ineligible for need-based assistance, Emma had apparently broken down crying to the housing counselor. "I was supposed to have my own apartment," she'd sobbed. "This isn't how it was supposed to work out." The irony wasn't lost on me. For 20 years, Emma had been shielded from any discomfort or inconvenience. Now, faced with the reality of shared bathrooms and cafeteria food, she was genuinely shocked that money couldn't immediately solve her problems. Meanwhile, my text messages had become increasingly hostile. Emma's friends had apparently convinced her that I was being unreasonable and selfish. Her messages ranged from pleading, "I just need somewhere quiet to study for finals," to accusatory, "You're ruining my college experience because you're jealous," to downright nasty, "Everyone thinks you're a terrible sister." I screenshot the worst ones and saved them in a folder labeled evidence without responding to any of them. Margaret had warned me that Emma would escalate before she accepted the new reality. The escalation came on a Thursday evening when Emma showed up at my apartment building, crying dramatically in the lobby until Mrs. Parker from the first floor let her in. She knocked on my door with the kind of persistent, demanding rhythm that suggested she wouldn't give up easily. "Lydia, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Emma looked terrible. Not the carefully styled perfection she usually maintained, but genuinely disheveled. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "You have to help me," she said immediately. "I can't live like this anymore. The dorm is horrible. My roommate snores, the bathrooms are disgusting, and I can't concentrate on anything. My grades are suffering. I'm sorry you're having a difficult time," I said honestly. "College dormitories can be challenging to adjust to. You don't understand. I never signed up for this. When I chose this university, I thought I'd be living in the downtown apartment. I planned my whole college experience around having my own space, my own kitchen, my own bathroom, and there it was." Emma genuinely believed she'd been promised something that was never hers to begin with. In her mind, the apartment had always been intended for her use, and my claiming it was somehow theft. "Emma," I said gently, "that apartment was never promised to you. It was my birthday gift from Aunt Margaret. You were living there illegally." "It wasn't illegal. Mom and Dad said I could live there." "Mom and Dad don't own that apartment. They never owned that apartment. They had no right to offer it to you." Her face crumpled into fresh tears. "But what am I supposed to do now? I can't live in the dorms for 4 more years. I'll go crazy." "You'll adapt," I said simply. "Millions of students live in dormitories. Most of them survive the experience just fine. Most of them weren't raised like I was. The honesty of that statement was startling. Emma was acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that she'd been raised with privileges that most people don't have, that she'd been sheltered from normal inconveniences and challenges that other young adults face regularly. You're right, I agreed. Most students weren't raised to believe they deserve luxury housing as a basic right. Most students work part-time jobs to help pay for college. Most students share bathrooms and eat cafeteria food and study in libraries because their living spaces are too small or too noisy. Are you saying I should get a job? The question came out with such genuine confusion that I almost laughed. Here was a 20-year-old college student asking if she should get a job like it was a completely foreign concept. Emma, how do you think I paid for college? That's different. You always worked. I was focused on my studies. What's your GPA? I asked. She looked uncomfortable. It's not about grades. It's about the full college experience, social development, networking opportunities. In other words, she'd been coasting academically while living in an apartment she didn't deserve, funded by money that should have gone elsewhere. The full college experience she was worried about losing was actually the life she'd stolen from me. I'm not going to help you, Emma, I said finally. You have housing. You have meal plans. You have everything you need to succeed in college if you choose to apply yourself. What about what Dad said? About working something out where I could stay here sometimes? Dad doesn't make decisions about my home. Fine, she snapped, the tears drying up as anger took over. Keep your precious apartment. But don't expect me to forgive you for this. Don't expect me to ever speak to you again after college. I don't, I said honestly. I don't expect anything from you anymore, Emma. And that's actually quite liberating. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving her standing in the hallway. Through the peephole, I watched her pound on the door a few more times before giving up and leaving. Later that evening, Dad called. His voice was tighter and more frustrated than I'd ever heard it. Emma came home crying tonight. She says you were cruel to her. I was honest with her. She's just a kid. Lydia, she's struggling with a major life change. She's 20 years old, Dad. When I was 20, I was working full-time while going to school full-time and raising Danny on my own. Emma is struggling with having to live like a normal college student for the first time in her life. We've decided she needs to get a part-time job, he said grudgingly, to help build character and responsibility. I nearly dropped the phone. After 20 years of protecting Emma from any kind of work or responsibility, they were finally going to make her get a job, because she could no longer live in stolen luxury. That sounds like a good decision, I said carefully. But she shouldn't have to work while living in substandard conditions. If she could just use the apartment on weekends. Dad, stop. What? Stop trying to negotiate. Stop trying to find compromises. Stop acting like Emma's comfort is more important than basic honesty and fairness. The apartment is mine. It will always be mine. Emma will never live here, not even on weekends, not even during finals, not even in emergency situations. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. There's a difference. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he sighed deeply. I don't know what's happened to our family. What happened? I said quietly. Is that someone finally pointed out that we've never actually been a family. We've been a hierarchy with Emma at the top, you and Linda in the middle, and me at the bottom. The only difference now is that I'm not participating anymore. I hung up before he could respond. Months later, I'm sitting in the breakfast nook of my apartment, drinking coffee and watching Danny build elaborate Lego cities on the dining room table that actually has enough space for his projects. Morning sunlight streams through windows that face east, just as Margaret promised, and I can hear children playing in the park across the street. My life has settled into a rhythm I never thought possible. Work doesn't feel crushing when I'm not constantly worried about money. Danny thrives in his new school, where teachers know his name and parents invite him to birthday parties. Our evenings are peaceful instead of stressful, filled with homework at the kitchen table and bedtime stories in his beautiful bedroom. The financial transformation has been remarkable. Without rent payments, I've been able to build a savings account for the first time in my adult life. I bought Danny new clothes that actually fit instead of hand-me-downs from older cousins. I can afford to take him to movies and museums without calculating whether we'll have enough money for groceries afterward. But the emotional transformation has been even more profound. I'm calmer, more confident, more present. When colleagues at the hospital comment on how different I seem, I tell them I finally learned the difference between being independent and being abandoned. The family situation has reached a predictable equilibrium. Emma did eventually get a part-time job at a coffee shop near campus. Though according to my cousin Sarah, she complains constantly about having to work weekends and deal with difficult customers. Her grades improved slightly once she was forced to develop actual study habits, but she still maintains that her college experience has been ruined by having to live like a normal student. Dad and Linda have apparently told extended family members that I'm going through a difficult phase and that they're giving me space to work through my issues. The narrative allows them to maintain their image as reasonable parents dealing with an unreasonable daughter. I don't bother correcting anyone's assumptions anymore. Margaret and I have grown even closer, bonded by the shared experience of my family's betrayal. She splits her time between traveling and spoiling Danny, who now calls her his adventure grandma, because she brings him treasures from every trip. Last month, she took us both to Disney World for a long weekend, Danny's first real vacation. The text messages from Emma eventually stopped, probably because I never responded to any of them. Dad still calls occasionally, usually when there's some family event he thinks I should attend, for Danny's sake. I decline politely but firmly. Danny has plenty of family in Margaret, plenty of friends at school, and plenty of love at home. He doesn't need exposure to people who view his mother as disposable. The most surprising development has been my relationship with my extended family. Cousins and aunts who had always seemed distant have reached out after hearing Margaret's version of events. Apparently, my immediate family's treatment of me has been obvious to outsiders for years, but no one felt comfortable commenting on it directly. We always wondered why you seemed so careful around them, my cousin Rachel told me during a recent phone call, like you were afraid of taking up too much space or asking for too much attention, because that's exactly what I was doing. I'd spent 31 years trying to prove I deserved to exist in my own family, moderating my needs, minimizing my presence, making myself small enough to fit into the leftover spaces of their attention. Not anymore. This morning's mail brought a wedding invitation from a college friend, and for the first time in years, I can afford to buy a nice gift and travel to celebrate with her. Tonight, Danny and I are going to the Children's Theater downtown, something we've never been able to afford before. This weekend, we're hosting Margaret for dinner in our beautiful dining room using the good dishes that came with the apartment. These aren't dramatic victories or life-changing moments. They're just normal experiences of a stable, comfortable life. But after years of struggle and uncertainty, normal feels revolutionary. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number, and for a moment, my old anxiety kicks in. But it's not Emma or Dad or Linda with another demand or guilt trip. It's a colleague from work, asking if I want to join a group of nurses going out for dinner next week. Yes, I text back immediately. I'd love to join you. I can afford dinner out with friends now. I have reliable babysitting because Mrs. Parker downstairs adores Danny and enjoys earning extra money watching him occasionally. I have the emotional energy for social relationships because I'm not constantly managing family drama or financial stress. Looking back, I realized that what happened at Christmas dinner wasn't really about the apartment, though the apartment changed everything. It was about finally seeing my family clearly, without the fog of obligation and hope that had clouded my vision for decades. They didn't stop loving me. They never started. But Margaret did. Danny does. My real friends do. And most importantly, I've finally learned to love myself enough to demand better treatment. The apartment was a gift, but the life I've built here, that's something I earned. As I finish my coffee and get ready for another day at a job I enjoy, in a home I love, with a child who feels secure and happy, I think about that moment at the Christmas table when the truth exploded like a bomb in the middle of Linda's perfect dinner. The best part wasn't watching their faces when they realized they'd been caught. The best part was watching my own reflection in the dining room mirror and seeing a woman who finally knew exactly what she was worth. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when family lets you down. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.